Welcome back. We've got a two-parter here, and they're going to be separate because in the first part, we're going to talk about how we made a decision with the investor, how the investor really made the decision ultimately about buying a home and some of the parameters that go along with it. And then in the second part, I'm going to take you into an Excel spreadsheet that we're going together see the numbers as they go in. And so you can see how this computed out so that those return on investment parameters, those metrics that you saw earlier in the class, will become manifest with something that actually happened that was real. So I chose one from about a year and a half ago. I'll explain it just a little bit more as we go through it about why we did this. And it has negative cash flow in it. And I wanted to do that to feature that, mainly because positive cash flow is always good, but negative cash flow, I'm going to show you how you can make money on an investment. So let's kind of go through the decision making. So we're going to talk about a single family home. All right. And in the case of a single family home where it's a 3 or 4 bedroom, and in this case, it's a 4-bedroom home. The thing is, we want something that's probably in the suburbs of a city where the schools are really, really outstanding. Now, why are the schools outstanding? Well, to a great extent, there was a money flight starting back in the 70s where the suburbs kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger, especially in certain parts of the country. And so, that old thing from an old movie about follow the money and you'll know what's going on. Schools, there's some where there may be some extras that you have to pay for in terms of supporting the school systems. But most areas that you're going to invest in, it's in the tax base. And so part of your taxes that you pay on properties is going to go into the school system. And so the more money going there, the better. So, and also the suburbs had land in a lot of these places. And so a lot of new construction, more expensive in construction was there. So that's where you're going to find the better schools, the better facilities, the newer schools, the big stadiums, the music halls, everything, that, is going to be very, very special for a children's education. Now, there's multiple school reports that are out there, and if you're going to look at them on your own, I just suggest you Google it and find different ratings that you have to see if it's A, B, or C. Obviously, you're looking for an A. Another thing that can be significant in a home is how close the elementary school is, because we have found that can be a very determining factor, because the youngest children is the ones that you want close by. By the time they get older, they may have a car, they may be, it's a different story. So, but if you take somebody in second grade, something is very, very close is good. And then how new are the buildings? I grew up at a time where I went to a school that, was a lot of asbestos, So instead of winning, maybe the asbestos affected me, maybe instead of the Nobel Prize, I became a realtor. I don't know. But the thing is, it was built in the 1930s. A lot of these schools that you're getting in the suburbs are going to be new schools with modern facilities, modern central heat and air, great libraries, great everything. And so it's very, very important that you look at the quality of the buildings themselves. Now, obviously, that's not everything about a school system. That's why the school ratings are important. How are the teachers? How's the curriculum? This is the thing that you look for, because when somebody comes into town to move there for a job, this is what they're looking for. This is the number one thing in a lot of cities, especially in the Midwest, the Southwest, but also the North. It is an important factor. And then the next thing is we had to analyze supply and demand. And so what I can do is I can have a program where I can find how many non-occupant properties are in a neighborhood. So a couple of things, and I'll explain why we chose this house to use. Number one, you want to set a limit, that's 10% or less. The lesser, the better, because owner occupants drive your appreciation, and too much supply, as we've talked about before, is really going to hurt your rental ability. It's going to really up your vacancy rate because there's too much to choose from. So that's extremely important. But the first thing I do is I look at my program and I say, okay, I see all these LLCs, limited liability corporations. That's a rental. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a rental if they're sending it to some other kind of address, but more than likely they are, and I'm not going to go any further in terms of going into that. I'm assuming that if it's an out-of-state address, it's not an owner-occupant, it's an investor. So if I see a high level of, investment properties, then I'm going to be very hesitant. And that's when I'm going to consult with the property manager and say, look, you tell me what the history is, not only of this neighborhood, but the area. How are these people responding to school systems? What kind of reviews are you getting? And you don't just check the exact neighborhood you're buying in. You kind of widen the angle just a little bit of other neighborhoods around it that are in that school system, just to see how it affects it. Now, this is a lot of work. It's a lot of work on my part or anybody that's going to be helping you out. But this is the only way that this really works. And it works in conjunction with the property manager also. So that's very important. And by the way, the example that you're going to see is less than 5%. In fact, we sold the only rental properties in this neighborhood. The reason why we chose this, and it's a $300,000 house that was undervalued at the time, was because everything else was more expensive, $350,000, $400,000. And these are properties that are going to go to owner occupants. And so we said, hey, this is great. And a lot of these people want to be in a more expensive neighborhood to rent. They go, look at the houses around us, the quality neighborhood. So some of the things that, can really help you out, if you're buying this type of a property. The next thing we do is location within the neighborhood, okay? Where it is extremely important. If it's the first house that you come into, if it backs up to a busy street, if it's what I call a T-lot, it's where you're coming in with a car and then you got to go left and right and around this in order to get to the next block. But remember at night what lights do? And they go into the living room. So we try to avoid T-lots. I mean, that's just something we do. So we're looking for anything that may have an impact because of its location on that. So, for instance, one of the things we do on new construction is we'll send the plat, mark where the house is within the neighborhood, explain what that means to them, and so that they know it doesn't back up to a highway or, it's not something that is going to be detrimental to rentals. So you got to look even further of the location within the neighborhood. And then the property manager, this is huge. So, your realtor or your professional that you're using should never set the rents. Why? Because they're not doing it. They're not the ones with their feet on the ground, interviewing, prospective tenants. And you want to avoid the possibility that somebody is, like I did previously, and where somebody said, oh, you're going to get $1,700, $1,900, whatever it is, and you don't get it. That's terrible. So the property manager should set the rents based on historical data. They should view the property, and I've had situations where something looked really, really good. I went, wow, it's a good buy. And then the property manager drives by and say, no, you can't do this. There's a 45-degree slope going down to the house. We're in an area where we get heavy rains, concentrated rains, could affect the foundation. It's not good for the kids, playing in the backyard. And since I give the property manager veto power, and that's what anybody in my position ought to do, is if they say no, it should be no. Now, you can argue with them, but ultimately, if that argument doesn't work, then you just turn away and say, I've got to trust your judgment. Because, as I've said before, what I do is paper. I give you a spreadsheet, I give you a return on investment analysis that you're about to see, but I'm not the one that has to rent the property and be responsible. And as I've said before, the first call when somebody's angry is to the property manager, but I'm number two, and I prefer not to get called. And so this is why I do this way, why any professional should do this way, because we'd rather be busy doing positive things, not negative things. And if it's negative, guess what? You're never going to buy from that person ever again. So it's important to get this thing right. So I'm going to stop it there. And the reason why is because this next section is where we're going to fill out this particular property that we're talking about so that you can see how the numbers work and you can see what parameters are needed to be put in so that if you're dealing with somebody on getting a rental property, you know the kitchen sink, you know everything that should be there, and you're going to see those return on investment metrics, not all of them, but the big three, and you're going to see those at the end. So stay tuned. We're going to drill down into the numbers on the next module.